This is the story of the only airport in Europe where pilots are legally forbidden from landing unless they've completed special simulator training, where the runway is half built on 180 concrete pillars standing 70 meters above the Atlantic Ocean, and where a single disaster in 1977 reshaped how an entire island connects to the world. Madeira's Cristiano Ronaldo International Airport looks terrifying on video for a reason, but behind every white-knuckle landing you've ever seen sits a system of rules, training, and engineering designed to make the impossible look routine. Let's begin with where this airport actually sits, because the geography explains everything that follows. Madeira is a Portuguese island roughly 400 kilometers north of the Canary Islands and about 1,000 kilometers southwest of Lisbon. The airport occupies the civil parish of Santa Cruz, about 13 kilometers northeast of the capital city of Funchal, and its IATA code is FNC. On July 8th, 1964, the airport officially opened when a Air Portugal Lockheed Constellation carrying 80 passengers completed the inaugural flight onto a runway just 1,600 meters long. Engineers built the airport on a coastal plateau jutting into the Atlantic, and the terrain around it is brutal. Mountains climb sharply to the northwest, with the island's highest peak reaching roughly 6,110 feet within 9 nautical miles of the runway, and the ground above 2,500 feet pressing in within just 3 nautical miles. To the southeast, open ocean and cliffs. One mountain in particular, Pico do Facho, makes a normal, straight-in instrument approach to runway 05 physically impossible, which means there's simply no way to line up with the runway from a distance the way you would at a typical airport. That geographic trap is what led directly to the darkest day in the airport's history. On November 19th, 1977, TAP Flight 425, a Boeing 727 operating from Brussels via Lisbon to Funchal, was attempting its third landing in heavy rain, and this was the final attempt before the crew would have been required to divert to Gran Canaria. The aircraft touched down 630 meters past the threshold at 148 knots, 19 knots above recommended speed, and that's when everything fell apart. The plane aquaplaned on the wet runway, overran the end at roughly 43 knots, plunged over an embankment, struck a stone bridge, and broke in two on Santa Catarina Beach. Of the 164 people on board, 131 were killed and 33 survived. And to this day, it remains TAP Air, Portugal's only fatal accident in the airline's entire history. Just 29 days later, on December 18th, 1977, it happened again. SATA Flight 730, a caravel carrying 57 people on a charter from Zurich and Geneva, struck the sea 4 kilometers short of runway 06 after descending below circling minimums. 36 people died, 21 survived, and the airport's original 1,600-meter runway was clearly no longer sufficient for the jets that needed to use it. 2 disasters, 1 month, 167 lives lost. Construction on a runway extension began in 1982, and on February 1st, 1986, President Ramalho Eanes inaugurated a new 1,800-meter runway, which helped but was not enough. Larger aircraft and more passengers meant the airport still needed something far more ambitious, but nowhere to extend existed. Building inland would have meant carving through mountains, while extending into the sea with landfill would have destroyed the coastal ecology. So engineers proposed a solution never attempted at this scale anywhere in the world. They would build the runway on stilts. The extension, completed on September 15th, 2000, stands as an engineering feat that still holds a Guinness World Record as the longest bridge-supported runway extension on Earth. Today, the runway stretches 2,781 meters, and roughly a kilometer of that length rests on a reinforced concrete platform supported by 180 pillars standing approximately 70 meters tall. The platform measures 1,020 meters long and 180 meters wide, with its deck sitting 57 meters above sea level, and it was engineered to handle the landing impact of a Boeing 747. Total cost came to 520 million euros, and in 2004, the International Association for Bridge and Structural Engineering presented the structure with its Outstanding Structure Award in Shanghai. But a longer runway doesn't fix the other problem, which is the approach itself. Because Pico do Facho mountain blocks any straight-in instrument approach, pilots flying into runway 05 must perform a curved, manually flown visual maneuver with no ILS to guide them. Inbound from the northeast, aircraft cross the coast at a waypoint called GELO at a minimum of 850 feet, then follow sequenced flashing curved approach lights, cross another waypoint called Rosario no lower than 460 feet, and finally execute a turn of roughly 150 to 180 degrees to the right. The aircraft only lines up with the runway about 1 nautical mile from the threshold, which means that final mile is essentially the only time the wings are level before touchdown. Pilots have nicknamed Madeira the Kai Tak of Europe, after Hong Kong's famously demanding former airport. And then there's the wind. Warm ocean air colliding with cool mountain air over the runway produces chronic turbulence, and the official Portugal Aeronautical Information publication warns of severe low-altitude wind shear and microbursts. Gabriel Lee of Flight Radar 24 has noted that the runway's own construction, raised up on columns, can actually create additional turbulent air, which means downdrafts and wind shear appear regularly on short final. All of this is why Madeira became the only airport in the world with legally binding, not advisory, wind limits. The typical ceiling sits at a 15-knot mean wind with 25-knot gusts from a specific sector during landing. And while most operators worldwide set stricter company limits voluntarily, Madeira is unique because the law itself sets the maximum. Which brings us to the pilots themselves. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency formally classifies Madeira as a Category C aerodrome, the most restrictive category, alongside places like Innsbruck, Salzburg, Santorini, and London City. Portugal's Civil Aviation Authority, ANAC, sets very specific requirements. A pilot in command must have a minimum of 200 hours on type before even beginning Madeira training. And for recency, they need 1 takeoff and landing at Madeira within the last 6 months, or 1 instructor-supervised line flight, or 1 adverse weather simulator session. Certification remains valid for just 6 months. Each airline's training program has to be individually approved by ANAC, and night operations are prohibited until a pilot has completed a daytime operation at the airport. On top of all that, nearly all operators restrict the takeoff and landing to the captain only, which means first officers don't fly the landing, and special rules mandate maximum braking power on every touchdown. When British Airways launched its Gatwick to Funchal service on May 11th, 2015, Captain Ali Wilcox, one of the airline's first Funchal qualified captains, put it this way: "Our highest priority is always safety. It's built into everything we do, including our approved plan for flights to Funchal." The airlines serving Madeira today read like a roll call of European short haul, including TAP Air Portugal, EasyJet, Ryanair, Jet2, TUI, and the Air Advisor 2025 Pure. Index named it Europe's most frightening airport with a score of 88 out of 100, placing it alongside Lukla in Nepal, Paro in Bhutan, and Courchevel in France. But Air Advisor's CEO, Anton Radchenko, was explicit that the ranking measured passenger sensation, not safety, meaning where people are most likely to feel turbulence, gusts of wind, go-arounds, or unusual approaches. Since 1977, there hasn't been another fatal accident at the airport. Meanwhile, the island itself keeps growing. Passenger traffic jumped from 3.2 million in 2019 to 5.4 million in 2025, a 50% increase in 6 years. And ACI Europe named Madeira the best European airport in the under 5 million passenger category for 2024. That is the paradox of Madeira. An airport with a reputation for being one of the most dangerous in the world turns out, by the numbers, to be one of the safest places a certified pilot can land. The runway on 180 pillars, the mountain that won't let you fly straight in, the legally enforced wind limits, the 200-hour minimums, the captain-only landings, the 6-month recertification. None of it exists because the airport is impossible. All of it exists because one night in November 1977, it turned out to be, and Portugal decided it would never be again. The result is an airport that forgives nothing, and therefore trains its pilots to forgive nothing in themselves.